Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Bald Explorer Live. We are reading Two Englands. I Saw Two Englands by H.V. Morton. I'm Richard Vobes. It's just after 4 o'clock in the afternoon here in the UK, but it may be another time where you are, and it depends if you're reading it live or not. Reading it or watching it. Viewing it, possibly, or listening. Who knows? Anyway, we're on chapter 7, I think it is. Chapter 7, something or other, part 3. Hello to Adrian. Hello to the lovely Julia. Hello to Jeff. To Audrey Forbes. To Judith. To Graham. And to Linda Kane. And anybody else who's coming along as and when. I've just been out for a picnic after having been out filming this morning to get tomorrow's video sorted out. But had a nice picnic with the lovely Julia and Elijah and Joseph over at Bramber Castle, which was very nice. Very hot, very sticky. I just washed my face and hands to try and cool myself down, and hopefully we'll be able to read clearly. Anyway, I hope you're all well. Welcome along. Graham Roffey has just joined us. Hello, Graham. So we're on chapter 7, and he has gone to Gloucester, I think. So we'll see how we get on. I hastened in the morning to a place some distance from Gloucester, which is still on the secret list. My letter of introduction, an unimpressive document, was redeemed by the striking phrase that it must be burned with fire the moment it had been surrendered. I came at length to a harmless-looking lane and a notice board which read, "Emergency powers. This highway is stopped." In a few yards or so, my path was barred by an Air Force sentry with a rifle and fixed bayonet. I produced my credentials, but he was such a good sentry that, still thinking I might be a spy, he took me to a corporal, who took me to a sergeant, who took me to 2 or more sergeants, who took me to the orderly room. Eventually, it was rather like having an interview at the Vatican, I progressed to grander and grander regions until I found myself in the presence of an adjutant, and actually next door to the commandant of the Royal Air Force Flying Training School. It was one of those days when I was looking less like my passport photograph than usual. Therefore, as the various officers gazed suspiciously at me, I had plenty of time to look through the windows and admire the layout of what is actually a town of flight. These training schools were started before the war as part of our rearmament scheme, and it is fortunate that many of them were completed by the time war was declared. Here is a nursery that is enabling us to gain control of the air. I was astonished by the size of the place. It looked rather like a young son of Port Sunlight or Bourneville. The commandant was a man of middle age and therefore, by the standards of his pupils, almost senile. He had flown in the last war, and as a chestful of ribbons proved, had seen a lot of trouble one way and another. He read my letter of introduction slowly and with care, and then, with a smile, asked for my passport and identity card. Hello, I'm just doing a show. Yes, I'm doing my reading. Sorry, my son's just come in and bellowed to me. Hello. Anyway, I was waiting to see if he would actually burn with fire the letter from the Air Ministry, or whether it was merely a matter of form. To my delight, he solemnly produced a box of matches, lit one, and holding the letter in flame, watched it curl up and blacken. The remains floated into his wastepaper basket. He turned to me with a pleasant expression. "And what would you like to see?" He reminded me of a vigorous schoolmaster preparing to show a parent around his school. I asked how the young men of this war compared with ourselves, the young men of the last one. "Oh, I think they're a better lot than we are," he replied heartlessly. "I like 'em. I'm proud of them too, but I don't let them see it. We're getting a grand type of fellow. He's full of spirit, initiative and guts. He's well educated. In fact, he's got to be. I'd like to tell you what splendid men the dominions and colonies are breeding. They take to the air like birds. They're born pilots." And he told me that a man must be something of a born pilot these days, otherwise he could never have stayed the course. Having passed a selection board which ruthlessly weeds out doubtful cases, the pilot-to-be has to pass a stiff medical examination before he's posted to an elementary flying school where he learns the ABC of flight, engines and guns. He then takes a course at an RAF depot and is taught to march and drill. He also works at as much theory as if he were studying for a university degree. Then he receives £50 from the Air Ministry to buy a pilot's uniform and kit, and proudly dressed, he goes to one of the flying training schools to add wings to his tunic. This is a grueling 4 months course of practical and theoretical work. In the last war, many a pilot had to complete his training over the enemy lines, but this time our pilots go out master of their jobs. Well, bear in mind this is written in 1939, and of course, as time went on, we were training up fighter pilots incredibly fast, and they barely had a chance to get any hours in the end, especially in the Battle of Britain. And I'm sure if Eddie is there, I don't know if Eddie's there today, he would definitely know. Lisa is saying, "Billy!" Dare I say, almost gone. Oh, what, your bread? Your bread is almost gone. I'm so sorry about that. It's so easy to eat it. Michael Angel says, I'm sorry, just reading the instructions for people listening. This is a question for all you lovely people in Sussex. How come we never see yellow door and window frames in Richard's windows? You only get them in certain areas of Sussex. Well, you're talking about the Cowdray estate. Well, let me rephrase that. The Cowdray estate uses a mustard colour, which is a deep yellow. Well, I didn't need to tell you that, but a mustardy yellow on their windows and doors to delineate their properties, and so that people know that they are the Cowdray Estate in Midhurst. But not everywhere does that. In Petworth, the Leconfield estate, I don't know what they do there. I think they have numbers. Maybe Linda Kane probably knows better than I do. It may be that they do green, a dark green. I can't remember. They're the two principal ones that I know of, but I dare say there are others who identify their properties in different ways. But it's a very good question. I have, if you follow, I did a walk from Easebourne, E-A-S-E, Bourne, which is near Midhurst, and you do see the yellow properties on that one. Ed Loud says, this other Ed happens to know you're right, Richard, taking a keen interest in elements of aviation myself. Oh, yes, I'd forgotten what it was that I was supposed to be right about. Oh, yes, about the guys. I mean, this is written in 39, so in theory, we've got enough trained pilots to see off the Germans, but of course, as war progresses, as we saw in the Battle of Britain, we were just desperate and more desperate, and people were going up with a third of the hours that would normally be given. JW is, I've shortened my name. Well, yes, you have. Ed Loud always wanted to pilot Harriers. It was my dream as a kid. Sadly, epilepsy prevented that. Ah, right. Cowdray Estate have yellow for workers. Oh, and green for managers. Oh, is that how it works? So there we go. Gosh, that's even more delineated than I realised. Anyway, I've lost my space now. Oh yes, they're all born pilots. Our pilots are masters of their job, so he says. Right. In the few hours I spent wandering around the flying school, I was struck by the extreme youth of everyone I encountered. I saw about 20 classrooms, in most of which sat a grimly intent group of young men in blue watching a lecturer at a blackboard. In the next and the next were the same young faces, lifted to the lecture or bent over notebooks. I have never before entered a classroom which did not welcome the arrival of even the most uninteresting intruder. But these men, these pilots, were so engrossed in their work to notice that they were being watched. What a curriculum it is! Engines, armaments, administration, signals, air navigation, airmanship, airframes, maintenance, and mathematics. Those are the junior lectures in this University of Flight. The seniors specialise in air photography and reconnaissance. Sorry, mental block on how to say it. Reconnaissance. And it's really interesting thinking about how much a pilot was trained or needed to be trained in an ideal world, and how much of that knowledge crammed into their heads only a month later perhaps to be shot down. And maybe they did and maybe they didn't bring down an enemy, and how the waste, obviously the waste of human life goes without saying, but the waste of all that knowledge going into a young mind and then being shot down like cattle fodder. It's so sad. Walking round from lecture room to armament store and from store to hangar, I had the impression of young men in various stages of training, some proudly winged, others as yet unfledged, all performing different tasks with remarkable absorption. I could have stayed a long time in those dark rooms, watching them develop those bird's-eye glimpses of distant landscapes which, to the unaccustomed eye, make the country look like it's been iron flat. But I was rushed off to the flying ground, where a group of pilots was advancing towards a line of training machines, each man strolling forward, heavily garmented, a parachute dangling like a cushion that had become attached to his seat. "You can quickly tell the fellows who's cut out to be a fighter and the man who should be a bomber," said the instructor. "For a fighter you want a quick, practical, joking kind of bloke who will take risks without making an ass of himself, but a bomber must be a calmer kind of chap. I should say that for a fighter you want spirit, and for a bomber you want nerve." Sorry, lost my space then. "A bomber must hold his course quite calmly when the shells are getting nearer." The young men, laughing, climbed into their line of machines. In a minute or two, they were several hundred feet overhead. War's attraction for youth, I thought, is that years of slogging and dreary routine and subservience to age are instantly abolished, and a man finds his feet among his contemporaries in the full springtime of life. It is rather as though a doctor, a barrister, or an accountant could reach eminence in his profession in 12 months. Knowing nothing about flying, I was fascinated by the invention, which is, I believe, a commonplace in all flying schools, the link trainer. I went into a room occupied by a young officer who sat at a desk with earphones on his head, studying a kind of planchette which slowly traces lines on a chart. The room buzzed electronically, or electrically even. Every now and then the officer glanced towards a weird, truncated aeroplane in the centre of the room, which turned slowly and swayed as if in flight, although it was firmly attached to a gigantic bellows. Inside this machine, concealed from view and sitting in darkness, a young pilot was learning to fly blind. He received all his instructions by phone from the officer, and he altered course, elevation, and so forth accordingly. "He's flying at 200 feet and at 135 miles an hour, said the officer. "He's made a good flight," he continued, pointing to a series of firm lines on the map. He whispered an order into his mouthpiece. The almost aeroplane changed course and made a kind of curtsy. "Oh, hell," said the officer. "What's happened?" I asked. "He's crashed." He whispered again, and the lid of the cockpit was pushed up to reveal a pink, embarrassed face. "I'm awfully sorry, sir," said the face. "I should think so," replied the officer. "You're dead." So perfectly does this earthbound aeroplane reproduce the act of flying that a man can be taught in this way to pilot a real machine, and although he may never have been in the air, he could go from the link trainer to a real machine and take it up in fog or by night. But of course, this is only part of the story. Another ingenious invention is the camera Obscura Hut, which tells an instructor whether a man in a bomber several thousand feet above him has, in theory, bombed the hut. The place is dark, save for a circle of light reflected upon a table through a lens in the roof. A spot in the centre of the table represents the hut. When an aeroplane is flying overhead, you can watch its shadow slowly cross the table as it's reflected by the lens. As it nears the centre, a tiny white flash is seen, which is really the firing of a magnesium bulb in the aeroplane. This represents the bomb, or rather the exact moment at which the bomber pressed the bomb release. The instant the flash is seen, it is plotted on the table. It is a simple matter to allow for the time taken for a bomb to drop according to the height of the plane and the angle at which it falls, according to the speed and the wind, and this shows you how near this teaches the bomber how to drop a bomb. We entered a building like a deep bear pit. On a wooden floor above the pit, a complicated piece of machinery was erected, which I was unable to explain in any detail. In principle, it was a photographic projector pointing downward, so that the lens flung the image of an aerial landscape on the concrete floor of the pit below. By extraordinary clever mechanism, this huge photograph is made to revolve and to produce the effect of a distant countryside moving beneath the body of an aircraft in flight. An ingenious arrangement regulates the speed at which the landscape moves, and it can be altered to correspond with the speed of a flying plane. Equally ingenious is the system of enlarging or making smaller the picture, according to the height of the imaginary aircraft from the ground. You can set the picture for, say, a speed of 200 miles an hour and the height of 1,000 feet, or any other given set of speeds and heights, and when you look down, you see the buildings, the roads, the belts of woodland and the towns exactly as they would appear to a man travelling in an aeroplane at the determined speed and height. The instructor switched off the lights and switched on the lantern. Setting the machinery in motion for a speed of 130 miles an hour and a height of 1,500 feet, he led the way down a flight of steps into the pit beneath. Projecting from the wall of the pit and jutting over the floor, perhaps 20 feet or so above it, was the platform of the bomber. It was complete in every detail: instruments, bomb sights, the bomb release. The pupil lies full length on the platform, just as the bomber does when he is approaching his target, and the instructor, standing behind, gives him a mark and takes his navigation orders. "Would you like to have a shot at it?" asked the instructor. I climbed up onto the bomb platform and lay down. There were various instruments in front of me, none of which I understood. However, the bomb sights were not difficult to grasp after a moment's practice. You look through them as though binoculars, keeping the object you are going to destroy in view all the time. The bomb release was the simplest of all. It was just like a press button on a self-working lift. "Are you all right?" asked the instructor. "I'm not feeling very efficient," I said, "but otherwise I'm all right." "Good. We're now flying at 130 miles an hour at a height of 1,500 feet, so you've got a good view of the Earth. I want you to bomb this." And the long shadow of a pointer suddenly streaked across the moving countryside below me and came to rest on a house which bore an astonishing resemblance to my own. "I don't like that target," I said. "Can't you find me something that looks a bit more suspicious?" By this time, the harmless-looking house had slid safely behind me. "Well, what about that railway station?" The pointer touched a network of rails which had just come onto the outer rim of the picture and was advancing beneath me at the speed of a slow-motion film. I willingly agreed to bomb the station, and I lay there watching it, keeping my bomb sights on it. But then the station suddenly swung off to the left and I was unable to find it again. The instructor told me that the wind velocity was so-and-so and the target was off our course, so that unless I gave him directional orders we would never get above it. By the time I had said left when I meant right, the station also had slid below me into safety. Bombing is not as easy as I thought it would be. He gave me a third target, another railway junction, and this time I was determined to make good. As the rails came towards me, I pressed myself firmly on the platform and squinted along the sights. I sang out "left," and he swung the machine into line with the target, but a trifle too much. I sang out "right," and then we were dead on, and at the precise moment I saw the station below, and there were two trains and one siding, I pressed the button of the bomb release. Down through the 1,500 feet of air fell a small cross in electric light. Actually, the pressing of the release had reflected this light immediately on the picture, but as the picture continued to move for several seconds, it looked as though the bomb was actually dropping through the air. The seconds represented the time taken by a bomb to fall from the moment it leaves the bomb rack to the moment it hits the ground. Then, abruptly, the whole landscape became still, and looking down I saw the cross shining in the place where I had made the hit, if it had been a bomb. I had missed the station and hit a farmhouse about a quarter of a mile away. I was horrified. Before I left the school, I spoke to several of the infants there. I asked them why the RAF attracted them. They found it difficult to formulate, but I pressed them hard. "Well," replied one who was unborn at the time of the armistice, it's exciting, and it's quick, and I've always wanted to fly." Another, who must have been an infant in a perambulator when the Kaiser slipped into Holland, said, "I want to be a pilot because, well, it's like the knights of old, isn't it? You come out of the clouds and pick your enemy and do your stuff and dash off again." That, I thought, was getting nearer to the heart of it. The RAF has revived the romance of single combat, but for the first time since the age of chivalry, armed men charge together in mortal combat and fight their tournaments in the boundless lists of the sky. We'll just take a momentary pause. Not as amusing as the earlier chapters of the book, but fascinating nonetheless. I hope you're finding it fascinating and not boring. Just watching SpaceX using touchscreens instead of the switches. The space shuttle was quite shocking, says JW. I don't know how far you've been chatting. I love RAF Cosford. It's the only Vickers Valiant. It has the only Vickers Valiant still left. Also, the actual aircraft XD-818 that dropped Britain's first hydrogen bomb in 1957. Golly. Ed Loud says, would you now be surprised how old those pilots are, relatively speaking, in general, especially the fighter jet pilots? How things have changed in peace. Not quite sure what you mean. I mean, they were very young, weren't they? Maybe Petworth, being National Trust, uses green. Oh, yes, going back to the identifying the estate properties. Well, I know about the doctor stuff. Hope all is well. My epidural... Oh, okay. I have Hendon Air Museum about 20 minutes from where I live, says Michael Angel. Oh, right. JW, hope all goes well, doing the infusions and what have you. Sorry, just trying to go through these comments in case there's anything I should be... don't think about Tonka navs or front seaters made it to 6,000. Not quite sure what you mean there. Speaking of planes, says Alan Bastard, Boyzone stuff here, Wings Over Everest on YouTube, brilliant. It won't allow me to post the link. Don't worry, we can look that up. Sorry, itchy eye. When everything reopens, I'm going to see SR-71 Blackbird in Richmond, VA. I'm not sure what a... Is that an aeroplane? Ed Loud says it's cool when people know the names of pilots like in the old days, like you just said, Ben. My favourite modern-day pilot is named Abby Mark. My dad was in the RAF in World War II. I have his logbook, which is really interesting to read, says Judith. Yeah, I bet that is. Spitfires were at such a disadvantage with machine guns when German planes had cannons, says Michael Angel. Yes, I did read. Although, am I right in thinking... I can't remember which one it is that turns on a sixpence. One, I think this, either the Hurricane turns better or the Spitfire goes faster or something like that. Anyway. The blackout came upon me in a country town where I had difficulty in finding anywhere to stay because the town was occupied by musicians, vocalists, educationalists, professors, and others who had been called to the microphones of Hush Hush Hall. When the story of the war is written, the removal of the BBC into the country will take a high place in the fantasy. The location of the new broadcasting studios was a state secret. At the moment of writing, although it may be permissible to whisper the name of the place, it is necessary, if you wish to write to the BBC, to address the letter to a box number at the local post office. So the fiction is maintained that the BBC is secretly hidden away and nobody knows where. The town accepted its distinction with enthusiasm. It was great fun to watch the crowds of people bearing cellos, drums and other bulky articles which every London express deposited upon the station platform. Men and women familiar until then as voices became visible personalities, and autograph albums were soon sold out. In addition to the daily visitors, there was a large residential staff of administrators, secretaries, musicians, choirs, electricians, and mechanics, all of whom were installed in hotels or billeted in houses. Those without cars were given bicycles in order that they may reach Hush Hush Hall. I received a call in the morning from the director of programmes who I'd often met in London. Instead of the faultless town clothes in which I remember him, he now wore a riding coat, breeches and boots. I asked if he rode on horseback to the microphone, but no, he said he still had his car, but he lived some distance away in a thatched cottage, approached by a sea of mud, and found his present attire more suitable. I gathered that Hush Hush Hall had to be seen to be believed, and that the exiles from Langham Place were enjoying themselves in the country. Few of them ever wanted to see Broadcasting House again. Having produced a pass, I was taken off to see the hall. It lay beside a country road some way out of town. We passed cyclists, male and female, busily pedalling in its direction. We passed a small motor omnibus containing an orchestra. We run a bus to and from the hall every hour. It's absolutely essential, especially after blackout. We came to a pair of wrought iron gates. Standing outside, looking extremely out of place, was one of the commissionaires from Broadcasting House. He halted us, examined my pass, and although my friend goes in and out every day and is well known to everybody, he insisted, like a good marionette, on viewing his pass as well. Did I say marionette? Martinet, I think that is. We were then at liberty to enter the sweeping drive, which soon brought us in sight of a remarkably ugly country house. It is a queer, eccentric-looking house, not quite English, and not quite anything else. It was built, I was told, during the last century by an exiled nobleman who, amid English meadows, dreamed of his eventual restoration of the dignities of his ancestors. The hall itself is occupied by the administrative members of the staff, and stables and coach houses have been turned into studios. All the concerts and talks, everything in fact but the news bulletins, still come from London, and the theatre organ, which was apparently too large to move, is broadcast from the stables of Hush Hush Hall. We explored the house, a gloomy place full of dark panelled rooms, decorated everywhere by the coronet and escutcheons, I'm sure I've said that wrong, of the previous owner. Escutcheons? The bathroom, however, terminated in a coronet, and every door plate bore the same uneasy symbol. Glancing through the windows, I saw a number of men and women approaching the house on bicycles, and among them I recognised Mr. Stanford Robinson, the conductor. Several of the girls were members of the resident choir. Leaving this strange Anthony Hope mansion, I approached the range of red brick stables, lofts and outbuildings, where I found the greatest surprise of all. Here, where the grooms once whistled as they cleaned saddles, where coachmen washed down the emblazoned carriages, where horses stamped in box and stall, are microphones which record the voices and music which we hear every day. The engineers have made a wonderful job of it, and the studios are almost as efficient as those in Broadcasting House. The big studio where the orchestra concerts are broadcast is the long coach house with a high, girded roof, but the soundproof walls and doors and the blaze of electric light have disfigured its former purpose. At intervals of an hour, the motor omnibus drives up from the town, and out of it step vocalists and instrumentalists and other performers who are due to broadcast. Those who have just given a broadcast take their places in the coach, and the BBC bus goes back along the country road to the town. The nightmare of the programme director, announcer and conductor is that some distinguished performer may be discovered at that moment of his broadcast miles away in a blacked-out town. I asked someone to explain a notice board which bore the words, "To the Bear Pits," thinking that perhaps some facetious member of the BBC had put it up in reference, maybe, to the wartime studios. But I was told that the previous occupant had satisfied an aristocratic eccentricity by keeping wild bears. Passing my way through dank bushes and trailing briars, I came to a slight rise of ground on which were built cages for wild animals. As I was inspecting them, a creature wilder and more ferocious than any bear flung itself from the gloom of the cage and leapt in fury against the bars. He was a dog, but of what fabulous breed I do not know, a creature as big as a Great Dane and as shaggy as an Airedale. As I looked at him, I seemed to recognise the hound of the Baskervilles. His cage was a mass of beef bones chewed white. He was, I think, the most savage-looking dog I'd ever seen, and I wondered why, of all the previous owner's wild animals, he alone should have survived an unhappy legacy for the BBC. Perhaps nobody was brave enough to take him on his way. But no, he is the BBC's own watchdog. He was procured at the outbreak of war to prowl the grounds, and he is let loose every night after dark. So let me warn you, never attempt to enter Hush Hush Hall over the fence. If a Beethoven symphony should ever be interrupted by a series of blood-curdling barks, you will know that the hound of the Baskervilles has earned his keep and caught a spy. I have to say, that is hilarious. That is a hoot. JW says an SR-71 Blackbird was the first true stealth plane, and like the US, spy planes flew on the edge of space. Oh, right. Okay, there we are. You're increasing my knowledge. Ben Reeve, SR-71 is one of my favourite planes too. Duxford has the only one on display outside the US, and I also believe that the Duxford B-52 still holds the record for the shortest B-52 landing. That's interesting. Graham Cass, 25% of German 109E fighter pilots became casualties just getting airborne. Oh yes, I did read something about that. There's a book I've got called I Flew for Hitler, or something like that, and it's the story of an ME 109. Although technically it was BF, wasn't it? BF 109, but ME became a sort of slang for it because it's easier to think of it as a Messerschmitt. Whereas BF, I can't remember what that stood for now, but I think that's correct. I gather they were the horrendous things to get off into the air. And as you say, 25% of German pilots who flew them had casualties because they kept crashing them. The Mustang is my favourite plane, says Michael Angel. Excuse me, yawning. Suddenly that 5:30 start is hitting me. Good afternoon, morning, says Kay Dean. Good morning. Germany killed more of their own pilots towards the end, as the RAF did. More of their own than the RAF. Yeah, well, that does not surprise me. We are now on Chapter 8. I'm loath to start Chapter 8. Just looking to see if there's any decent... Here's a picture of the simulator that they had, the link thing. That the pilot sits in. It does look like a little toy. I showed you the tanks. We're only 38. Oh, excuse me, I'm tired. Hush Hush Hall was at Wood Norton Hall in Evesham, I think. Oh, was it? I wonder if we can get a picture of it. He said it looked horrible, didn't he? Wood Norton Hall. Let's see. Wood Halton Hall. Oh, yes, and it's got BBC attached to it, images. Bear with me, caller. Yes, it's a strange-looking building. That's partly what it looks like. And if I do this. Oh, actually, if I do that, there we are. You get more of the whole picture. Let's see if there's some other views. No, that's not it. What happened there? No, I don't want that. I want this picture. Hush Hush Hall, yeah, it's all gables, isn't it? Hundreds of gables, and then the mock Tudor bit in the middle. How extraordinary. Wonder if it's got any pictures of the studios. I don't know what it said there, but these must be some of the studios that they set up. I'm just trying to read where it's. Oh, here we go. It's one of the offices of the a mock Tudor sandwich filling. Yeah, it looks like Bletchley. This is the BBC Home Service, and here is the news. There's some more pictures here. Let's just have a quick look. Wood Norton. Oh yeah, view. Curious, isn't it? Very, very interesting. How formal they look. I say, old chap, how do you think the war's going? Oh, I think it's going very well, actually. Don't you? Yes, I really do. Yes, I agree with you. Yes. What's on the next page of the script? Oh, I'm not sure. I don't think the typing pool have typed it up yet. Oh, I see. Are we sort of filling in time then? Yes, you could say that. I just did say that. Yes, and you could say that too. Yes, that's right. Well, anyway, I'm sure very shortly we'll be able to bring you something a lot more entertaining than two grown men talking as if they have nothing else to say. Do you have anything to say, Arthur? No, Reginald, I don't really have any more to say, other than the fact that microphone is quite an old-fashioned looking thing, isn't it? Yes, that's right. It's old-fashioned looking to you, but it's actually state-of-the-art to me. Yes. You do realise I'm standing in a cowpat? Yes, I've been standing in a cowpat all morning. And what's worse is the cow is actually underneath me. But don't let anyone know. No, righto. Thank you. Goodbye. Yes, well, anyway, that was a little ad-lib there. So, we've got Chapter 8 to look forward to, and I'll start reading that tomorrow, if that's all right, because it's a fresh thing. So, we'll be all right, chaps, as long as we still have this pinstripe material to make our double-breasted suits. Absolutely, old chap. Fancy a spot of tiffin? I think tiffin would be rather good. I say, I like a bit of tiffin, don't you? I reckon Richard is a frustrated continuity announcer. Oh, yes, I'd love to be sitting there going, and now on BBC Radio 4, we present a programme for older listeners, Jam on Your Butter. It is a programme dedicated to people who enjoy jam on their butter. However, not everybody enjoys full-fat butter. So if you're one of those listeners who find the full-fat butter issue a little distressing, we suggest that you turn off your radio and lie in a nice relaxing bath of lard. If that isn't available, then you could have a shower of baby oil. Whichever you choose, it's probably best to avoid this programme because it does sound a little slippery. Anyway, coming up after the news, we have another programme which will be equally irritating, and it's more of me just meandering. It's called Richard's Meanderings, and it features the continuity announcer Richard meandering through the day. A new programme will be after that. We have yet no time to even think of it because we're now running out of ideas. And that's another programme, Running Out of Ideas, and what to do about it. We'll interview 5 men who have no ideas whatsoever about what they're talking about, but it'll be fascinating to hear them try and come up with some ideas, seeing as 2 of them are going to be late for their train, and their wives will be very upset if they don't get home in time, because there's nothing worse than having burnt sausages, and that's what they will have when they get home. Anyway, it's now time for the programme that we were hoping to get to, but we haven't any time to watch it. So thank you for listening, and goodbye. Yes, I could do a BBC announcer. It would be quite funny. Oh, dear. You need the pips, that's true. Beep, beep, beep. At the first stroke, please go to the hospital immediately and tell somebody that you're not feeling terribly well. Thank you. There we go. I reckon, yes, that's it. Love impro. Anyway, enough of this nonsense. It's been great fun. Thank you for coming up. It's now 4:46 in the afternoon, and it's time for something a little less interesting. The rest of your life. Yes, the rest of your life is on for at least another 30 years. So please enjoy it whilst you can, and at the end, please write a report. So I could have actually read a bit of chapter 8, couldn't I? Really, I just mucked about. But anyway, I will start up chapter 8 tomorrow. I've got to finish off tomorrow's video, which I'm going to do now. But it's such a nice day. Apparently, this is the last of the nice weather here in the UK. So do enjoy it whilst you can. And remember, don't forget to turn the television off. Good night. So now I just want that white dot that goes beep like that. Monty Python, yeah, very Monty Python. Anyway, take care. Thank you for listening. And I will catch up with you on the next one, which we will do. And I'll do the full hour tomorrow, I promise you, because it's the beginning of a chapter. It's the beginning of a chapter. Take care. All the best. Thanks for watching.